What if I told you that the person who shattered your peace last week didn't actually have that kind of power? What if your worst argument, that sinking moment of betrayal, the heat rising in your chest when someone didn't text back, what if none of it was actually about them? Most people live their entire lives reacting, like emotional puppets, yanked by invisible strings. A comment ruins their mood. A look shatters their confidence. A missed call rewires their whole day. But what if you found out that the string was never in their hands, but always in yours? Let me tell you a story. Jenna was 26, a brilliant graphic designer in the heart of Seattle. She was talented, articulate, and quietly breaking on the inside. Every little thing got under her skin. A client's vague feedback left her spiraling for hours. Her boyfriend's silence after an argument felt like an abandonment. One day, after yet another fight over something neither of them could remember, she walked out of her apartment barefoot, her phone buzzing in her pocket like a siren, and found herself wandering into Discovery Park. She didn't mean to end up there, but life sometimes pulls you exactly where you didn't plan to go. She sat on a cold bench overlooking the water, staring at the vast gray horizon. Her mind was racing, her heart was heavy, and then, almost accidentally, she flipped open the back of her old sketch pad and saw a quote she had scribbled months ago. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." She stared at it. The words didn't offer comfort. They felt more like a slap, shocking, undeniable, and somehow freeing. That was the moment everything started to shift. Jenna realized she had been giving away her peace like it was free, to people who didn't mean harm, to people who were just busy, to people who didn't even know they were being handed the controls. She had turned her emotions into a public access channel, and now she was done. The truth is, you don't lose your peace because of what happens. You lose it because of the meaning you assign to it. That's what Jenna began to understand, and what transformed her from reactive to resilient. She started practicing something radical, the 10-second pause. Anytime she felt the fire rise the tight chest, the sharp retort on her tongue, she breathed. 10 seconds. No talking, no reacting, just breath. And then she asked herself a single question. Is this worth my peace? Most of the time it wasn't. Most of the time it was an old emotional reflex, screaming for attention. She was beginning to notice a deeper truth. People weren't really hurting her. They were just bumping into her wounds, so she did something. Simple but powerful. Every morning before checking her phone, she grabbed a pen and asked herself 3 things. What can I actually control today? What expectation do I need to release? Who do I want to be, regardless of what happens? This became her anchor, her reset, her daily act of reclaiming power. Jenna wasn't trying to be emotionless. She was learning to be unshakable, to stop being owned by every opinion, every mood swing around her. And the more she practiced, the more she changed. Her coworkers noticed she was calmer. Her partner noticed she argued less and listened more. But the biggest shift, she noticed it in herself. The silence in her mind was no longer empty. It was peaceful. For the first time, she wasn't at war with the world, and she didn't have to be. Because calm isn't something you stumble into, it's something you build. One breath, one pause, one choice at a time. Before we move on, if this story sparked something in you, if you felt even a flicker of truth, you can support this channel by subscribing. It's a small gesture, but it tells us these stories matter to you, and it helps us keep creating more. Now, I want to hear from you. Here's a question. When something triggers you, what's your first instinct? A. React immediately to protect yourself. B. Pause and try to understand what it's really touching inside. You drop your answer in the comments, A or B, and let's see how many of us are walking the path of inner mastery together. Leo didn't wake up one day knowing how to be calm. He earned it, night by night, behind a crowded bar in Austin, Texas, where the lights were dim, the music too loud, and emotions ran hotter than the liquor. For years, he met disrespect with sarcasm, passive aggression with precision comebacks. He was fast, witty, and utterly exhausted. What changed wasn't some philosophical awakening. It was a night like any other. A man stumbled in late, already drunk, already angry at something bigger than Leo. His words were sharp, a mix of slurred insults and personal jabs. Then the drink was airborne, shattering against the counter. Glass and whiskey sprang across the bar. Everyone froze. But Leo didn't. He didn't shout or throw the man out or call security. He didn't flinch. He simply wiped the counter, looked the man in the eye, and said quietly, "Are you okay?" The room shifted. The man sat down, his face crumbling into something entirely different. Pain, grief, something human. Leo had diffused hundreds of situations before, but this one stuck. It felt like a mirror. In that moment, Leo understood something he hadn't been able to name. People don't always want to be fixed. They want to be felt, and that included himself. He began noticing how often he had taken other people's chaos and made it his own. Someone else's bad day would pull him into anger. A snide comment would ruin his evening. A misunderstanding would live in his head rent-free. His energy wasn't being drained by life. It was being handed out like flyers to anyone passing by. He started asking himself a new kind of question. What if I don't respond? What if I protect my peace like it's something sacred? Silence became his new armor. Not the cold kind. Not avoidance. Just space. Space to hear himself before letting someone else's voice take over. At first it felt unnatural, like biting back instinct. But the more he practiced, the more he realized how rarely his immediate reaction actually served him. When he stayed silent, people revealed more. They showed their wounds, their fear, their stress, and suddenly, their behavior made more sense. He wasn't condoning disrespect. He was choosing not to let it own him. He developed what he called the mental balcony. Whenever he felt triggered, he'd picture himself watching the scene from above, like in a movie. From that distance, everything looked different. He could see patterns, reactions, old scripts playing out. And more importantly, he could decide if he wanted to participate. There was a deeper truth underneath it all. Most of the time, when someone upset him, it wasn't really about them. It was about the expectation he'd never voiced. The silent contract he'd written in his head that they never signed. Like the time a friend didn't call him back after a rough week. Leo felt abandoned, but when he looked closer, he realized he'd never actually said he needed support. He had hoped they'd just know. It hurt, not because of what they did, but because of what he assumed they should do. That shift changed everything. He stopped expecting people to be mind readers. He started communicating clearly, setting boundaries with honesty instead of resentment, and he let go of the need to explain himself when it wasn't necessary. Leo began tracking what he called peace points. Each time he could have reacted and didn't, he marked it down. When a customer snapped and he stayed grounded. When a text annoyed him and he didn't fire back. When he said no without guilt. These moments became quiet wins. Proof that he was changing. Over time, something beautiful happened. People noticed. Not because he was louder, but because he was steadier. His presence calmed rooms. His silence had weight. And the people who once tried to provoke him started treating him with more respect. Almost instinctively, what Leo discovered wasn't just emotional control. It was emotional clarity. He didn't need to explain his peace. He just needed to live it. Because the truth is, when you're no longer pulled by every emotional string around you, you start to feel something rare. Freedom. Not the loud kind. Not the temporary high of being right. But the kind of freedom that feels like stillness, even in the middle of noise. And in that space, Leo didn't just find calm. He found himself. Tasha had always been the one with answers. Quick on her feet, sharp with her words, respected in her circles. As the founder of a rising tech startup in Brooklyn, she had built her reputation on speed. Move fast, speak fast, make decisions faster. Her value had always been measured by her ability to respond without hesitation, until the day everything stopped responding to her. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when she got the email. An investor she had been counting on for months backed out at the last minute. No explanation, no warning. Just a cold paragraph filled with polite finality. Her chest tightened, not from the loss of funding, but from the flood of anger that rushed to meet it. Betrayal, disrespect. Her instinct screamed for reaction. She reached for her phone, fingers ready to draft a response so blistering it would leave a mark. But something in her paused. It was instinctual and unfamiliar. Instead of typing, she stood up, walked out of her apartment, and let her feet carry her without a destination. She ended up in Prospect Park, sitting on a bench near the lake, holding that anger in her chest like a live wire. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just sat. And in the stillness, something unexpected happened. The sharpness dulled. The betrayal remained, but it softened into something deeper, something older, a feeling she couldn't quite name. At first, when she closed her eyes, it wasn't the investor she saw. It was her father, who left when she was 12, promising to return but never did. The memory came uninvited, and yet, it was clear. The pain wasn't just about business. It was a pattern, a wound pressed by a new hand. Tasha had always been proud of how fast she could think, but that moment showed her the power of what happens when you don't, when you let silence speak before you do. She began practicing what she later called the 24-hour rule. If something made her emotional, she gave it a day. No decisions, no explanations, no messages sent. Just time. It wasn't always easy. Her mind itched to defend, to justify, to control. But the pause gave her something reaction never could: clarity. Sometimes after those 24 hours, she still chose to speak. But the words were different, cleaner, measured. She wasn't trying to punish, she was trying to understand. Other times, she said nothing at all. And that silence felt like reclaiming power she didn't know she had lost. The deeper lesson came, in waves. She started noticing how often people react, not to what just happened, but to everything that came before it. An email triggers a fear of being overlooked. A comment touches the bruises left by past dismissals. The moment is real, but the meaning is borrowed. She found herself journaling at night. Not about what others had done, but what she had felt. Not who was wrong, but what had been awakened in her. It was like emotional excavation. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered the layers beneath her frustration. There was always something under the anger, a hope, an expectation, a quiet plea to be seen or respected or valued. And when she met that part of herself with patience instead of judgment, something shifted. Her voice changed. Her pace slowed. She began to listen more, not just to others, but to herself. Tasha discovered that silence isn't the absence of power. It's where power regenerates. It's where wisdom catches up to emotion. It's where pain can be held instead of weaponized. The pause didn't make her less sharp. It made her precise. People noticed the change. Colleagues said she seemed more grounded. Friends confided in her more. Her leadership stopped feeling like control and started feeling like presence. The very thing she feared losing by staying silent, her edge had actually become sharper. But this time, it cut through noise, not people. In the world she lived in, fast had always been the standard. But now, she understood the value of slow. The moment between stimulus and response became her sacred ground. In that space, she had time to breathe, to remember, to decide who she wanted to be. Tasha didn't stop being fierce. She just became deliberate. And in that transformation, she found a kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. It simply stood still and let everything unnecessary fall away. That's the wisdom of the pause. It's not about silence. It's about sovereignty. And once you learn to wait, not because you're weak, but because you are strong enough to hold the moment, you begin to lead not from reaction, but from intention. Maya never thought she'd laugh the day he left. It was one of those gray Chicago mornings where the clouds hang low like a threat. She had just ordered a coffee, her favorite seat by the window already waiting, when her phone buzzed. A short message. No warmth, no punctuation, just an ending. 2 years, broken in 4 lines. At first, she didn't move. Then the barista called her name and she walked up, grabbed her drink, and sat down. Her hands trembled a little. She took a breath, read the message again, and then something strange happened. A quiet chuckle slipped out, then another, until she was sitting there, alone at the window, laughing softly to herself. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. It hit her like a wave. The years she had spent trying to make it perfect. The overthinking, the unspoken sacrifices, the waiting for him to notice when she was fading. And now it ended, not with a conversation, not with dignity, but a text. Something in her broke, but not the way she expected. It wasn't devastation. It was something else. Release. That moment cracked something open in her. She had always believed seriousness equaled strength. That being guarded, prepared, and rigid was how you protected your heart. But as she stared at that message, something softer began to rise. What if this wasn't a tragedy? What if it was comedy in disguise? She walked home differently that day. Not lighter, but looser. Her spine was still straight, but her shoulders dropped just slightly, like her body had finally let go of armor it no longer needed. For the first time in a long while, she didn't rehearse a response in her head. She didn't draft an unsent message. She didn't scroll through old texts looking for meaning. She just let it be. And that, she realized, was new. Maya started keeping a journal, not of her sadness, but of the absurd. Each day she wrote down something ridiculous that would have once ruined her mood. A train delay that caused people to panic, like it was life or death. A coworker's passive-aggressive email full of emoji smiles. The way a pigeon nearly stole her sandwich in the park. It wasn't sarcasm. It was clarity. She was training herself to see life for what it was. Messy, imperfect, wildly unpredictable. The more she laughed, the less control the world had over her. Not because she stopped caring, but because she stopped trying to control what was never hers to hold. That breakup didn't just end a relationship. It ended a chapter of self-abandonment. She stopped waiting for people to choose her. She started choosing herself. When someone canceled plans, she didn't spiral. When her phone was silent, she didn't assume the worst. She took herself to museums. She tried salsa dancing, even though she was awful at it. She stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, "Today, I'm not waiting for life to feel good. I'm going to meet it halfway." She found peace in the most unlikely of places. In laughter, not the forced kind. The real kind that comes when you finally stop fighting reality and just let it be what it is. Her power didn't come from detachment. It came from perspective. Maya started calling it her pivot point. That split second when you could spiral or smile. And every time she chose the smile, she added to her strength. Not in the way the world defines strength, but in the way the soul feels it. Rooted, whole, unbothered. She didn't forget the pain, but she stopped carrying it like a weapon. Letting go, she realized, isn't forgetting. It's choosing freedom over familiar suffering. It's recognizing that some stories don't need sequels, that some people don't deserve explanations, and that peace often sounds like silence after a storm. Maya became someone new, not because she changed who she was, but because she returned to who she had been before. She thought she had to prove her worth through being chosen. She laughed more. She forgave quicker. She let the nonsense pass like background noise. Not because she was numb, because she was finally awake. And in that awakening, she didn't just find healing, she found joy. The kind that dances through chaos. The kind that holds hurt without letting it define the whole story. The kind that says, I've been through the fire, and I didn't come out harder. I came out lighter. That was her revolution, and it began with a laugh. Derek used to believe silence meant surrender. He thought if he didn't speak up, push back, prove a point, he'd be overlooked, weak, small. So he mastered the art of the last word. He sharpened his thoughts like weapons and carried them into comment sections, text threads, and late-night arguments like a soldier armed for battle. Whether it was politics, relationships, or someone cutting in line, Derek never let a challenge go unanswered. At first, it felt powerful, like control, like presence, like strength. But somewhere along the way, that power turned to pressure. Every interaction became a contest, every disagreement a war to be won. He began noticing how hollow his victories felt, how even when he made the perfect point, people didn't feel closer. They felt smaller, quieter, gone. The truth started cracking. Through late one night, when he found himself arguing online with a complete stranger over something trivial. It had started as a joke, then spiraled into personal jabs and prideful defenses. After an hour of typing furiously, he paused. He read the screen, then looked at himself in the mirror across the room. His eyes were tired, his jaw clenched, his chest tight, and the voice in his head was finally quiet enough for a new one to rise. What are you trying to prove? The next morning, he deleted the thread, not in shame, but in release. That moment became a turning point. Derek started sitting with that question more often, not just online, but in real life. What am I defending? Is it truth? Or is it my pride? He realized how often he confused disagreement with disrespect. How often he responded not to what was said, but to what he felt threatened inside him. His need to be right was really a hunger to be seen, understood, validated. But when your self-worth depends on convincing someone else, peace becomes impossible. So he began choosing peace. Not the kind that avoids hard conversations or bottles up emotion. The kind that listens first. The kind that doesn't need to win to feel whole. The kind that knows silence can sometimes speak louder than argument. Derek started practicing what he called internal discernment. Before engaging in any conflict, he asked himself 3 questions. Is this conversation necessary? Is it rooted in connection or control? And if I speak, will it bring clarity or just noise? More often than not, he found his answer in stillness. He didn't stop having opinions. He just stopped offering them as weapons. He built digital boundaries too. He removed apps that fed his compulsion to debate. He muted accounts that triggered outrage. He gave himself permission not to react, not because he didn't care, but because he finally understood that not everything deserves his energy. The people around him noticed the shift. He wasn't less passionate, just less impulsive. His words carried more weight because they weren't fueled by ego. He stopped raising his voice and started raising his standards. If a conversation felt like a power struggle, he stepped away. If it felt like an opportunity to connect, he leaned in, and something strange happened. He felt lighter, stronger, whole. He realized peace is not weakness, it's clarity. It's the choice to no longer sacrifice your inner calm for momentary superiority. It's knowing your worth doesn't live in being right, but in being real. Derek still faced conflict. Life didn't suddenly get quiet, but now, when noise came, he didn't absorb it. He assessed it. He learned the power of walking away when a room only echoed ego. He discovered that peace is not passive. It's active restraint. It's maturity. It's mastery. He no longer needed to dominate the room. He learned to direct it with presence. And when someone challenged him, he didn't rush to correct. He asked, what's actually being said here? What's underneath this? Because sometimes the conversation isn't about the topic. It's about pain, projection, old stories playing out. By choosing peace, Derek didn't become invisible. He became undeniable. There's a quiet power in not being triggered, in knowing that you don't have to fight every fire, that some things burn themselves out without your oxygen, and in that space, where pride once ruled, peace moved in, firm, grounded, clear. Ariana always thought strength was something you showed on the outside. Her body was a testament to it. As a fitness coach in Denver, she lived discipline. Her posture was perfect. Her routines were precise. Her schedule never wavered. Clients admired her drive. Friends called her the rock, but rocks cracked too. The shift came quietly. A close friend, someone she trusted with years of memories, began to fade. Calls became short. Texts went unanswered. Eventually, without a word, that friend disappeared from her life entirely. No closure, no conflict, just absence. Ariana didn't react at first. She worked harder, trained longer, tightened every muscle and minute like it could hold back the ache. But the silence began to seep through. In the stillness between reps, in the quiet of her apartment, after long days, she felt it, that slow unraveling, not of anger, but of meaning. She realized something most people never pause long enough to confront. She was in incredible physical shape, but emotionally, she was running on instinct. Unexamined narratives shaped her reactions. Old patterns led her decisions. She could coach others through transformation, but hadn't turned that same lens inward. That night, she sat alone, and instead of opening a training plan, she opened a journal. She began writing not about goals, but about thoughts. The ones that ran beneath the surface. The beliefs that whispered she wasn't enough unless she was needed. That if someone left without explanation, it must have been her fault. That stillness meant weakness. Each page pulled back a layer. She saw how often her thoughts weren't facts, just old echoes. Scripts written in childhood, patterns formed from past hurts, assumptions disguised as truth. And in naming them, they lost some of their power. The next morning, Ariana created a new kind of routine, one not for the body, but for the mind. 5 minutes before the world touched her. A quote from the Stoics. A clear intention. One scenario where she imagined staying calm through challenge. It wasn't dramatic, but it was transformative. She started noticing when her thoughts tried to spiral. A canceled session didn't mean rejection. A client's frustration didn't define her. A quiet friend wasn't always walking away. Her mind, once her strongest critic, became something quieter, more curious. She learned to ask herself, what story am I telling right now? Is it grounded in reality or in fear? Ariana began practicing what she called mental alignment. Every day, she scanned her attention like she would her form in a mirror. Was she giving her energy to growth or to chaos she couldn't control? She unfollowed the accounts that drained her, set boundaries with people who took more than they gave, reclaimed the moments in between, the ones where peace is built, not by doing, but by choosing. And then came the gratitude. Not the forced kind, not the kind you list because you think you should, the real kind. The warmth of the sun through her window in the early morning. The text from a client saying thank you for believing in me. The quiet understanding that even in this moment, with uncertainty still lingering, she was exactly where she needed to be. Gratitude, she discovered, didn't erase pain. It just gave it context. It reminded her that she wasn't broken, just human. That healing wasn't a finish line, but a rhythm. As her mind changed, so did her presence. Her coaching sessions went deeper. Clients didn't just get stronger bodies, they left more self-aware, more grounded. Her silence became leadership. Her clarity, contagious, because leadership isn't about control, it's about example. About being the kind of presence others lean into, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Ariana didn't stop being strong. She just redefined what strength looked like. It was no longer in the reps or routines. It was in her restraint, her ability to choose peace over panic, reflection over reaction, wisdom over instinct. She became a mirror, not of perfection, but of possibility, and, in leading herself, she gave others permission to do the same. The Stoics didn't promise a life without chaos. They promised a life where chaos didn't rule you. Ariana now understood that. The true work isn't out there, it's in here. In the stories you challenge, the attention you protect, the presence you practice. Because in the end, the greatest thing you'll ever lead is not a team, a business, or a movement. It's yourself. In the quiet echoes of their separate lives, Jenna, Leo, Tasha, Maya, Derek, and Ariana each faced a world that demanded reaction, a world that pushed, provoked, challenged, and often disappointed. Each of them had been trained, in their own way, to fight back, to defend, to respond quickly and loudly. But underneath all of that urgency was something more vulnerable, a deeper hunger, a longing to feel steady in the middle of emotional storms, a longing to not be ruled by what others said or did. Their stories were different, but their transformation followed a shared path. Each of them encountered a turning point, not in triumph, but in discomfort. Jenna sat with her overwhelm and discovered the sacred power of the pause. Leo found mastery not in fixing others, but in refusing to be pulled by their chaos. Tasha faced betrayal and found clarity in her silence. Maya transformed her heartbreak into laughter and lightness. Derek traded his need to be right for something far more powerful, inner peace. Ariana learned to lead from within by aligning her thoughts, her attention, and her presence. What they all found wasn't a trick or a tactic. It was a way of being. It was Stoicism, not as philosophy on a page, but as a lived, breathing practice. Not about being numb, not about suppressing emotions, but about navigating life with presence, with perspective, with power that doesn't come from controlling the world, but from controlling how you meet it. They didn't become perfect. They still faced rejection, misunderstanding, setbacks. But they stopped letting those things define them. They stopped being emotional mirrors, reflecting the worst of what came at them. They became emotional anchors, choosing how to respond, what to carry, and when to let go. There's a kind of power in that which doesn't need recognition. It's quiet, it's dignified, and it changes everything. The most profound lesson their stories offer is simple, yet easy to forget. You are not at the mercy of what happens to you. You are the author of your response, and in that response lies your freedom. So what does that mean for you? Maybe it means the next time someone disappoints you, you take a breath before you speak. Maybe it means journaling instead of texting. Maybe it means letting go of the idea that you need to always be right, or always be understood. Maybe it means recognizing when your mind is feeding you a story that doesn't serve you, and choosing to write a better one. It could be as small as a morning ritual, reading a quote, setting an intention, or imagining how you want to handle the day's challenges. It could be as big as shifting the way you relate to the people who have the most power to disrupt your peace. It means asking yourself, more often than not, is this worth my energy? Is this reaction building me or breaking me? And the truth is, the more you practice, the less you'll be thrown. The more space you'll find between what happens and what you do. That space is where self-leadership begins. That space is where calm lives. And in that space, no one else gets to decide who you are. So now it's your turn to reflect. Which part of this journey did you resonate with the most? Was it Jenna's 10-second pause, Leo's emotional detachment, Tasha's 24 rule, Maya's laughter, Derek's peace over pride, or Ariana's inner leadership? Tell us in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway from this story? And more importantly, how will you begin to apply it in your life, starting today? Share your perspective. Let's build a conversation where we can all learn from each other's insights. If this story moved you, taught you something, or reminded you of your own power, consider subscribing to this channel. It's a small gesture that means everything to creators who pour their heart into content like this. Your support gives us the fuel to keep going, to keep sharing, and to keep bringing you deeper stories that make you feel something real. Thank you for watching. And remember, peace isn't found. It's practiced. One breath, one pause, one moment at a time.